The story of the Slaton sisters has always been filled with challenges, heartbreaks, and unexpected twists. But nothing could prepare fans for the deeply emotional moment that shook Amy and her entire family. Amy Slaton, who had already been through a roller coaster of ups and downs, faced one of the hardest battles of her life as her health, her relationships, and her responsibilities as a mother collided in ways no one could have predicted. From the very beginning, Amy's journey on 1000 LB Sisters captured the hearts of millions because she represented something raw and real, someone who wasn't afraid to show her struggles, her mistakes, and her dreams. And yet, behind the laughter and lighthearted moments, Amy's life began spiraling into territory she never thought she'd have to face. It all started quietly, almost too quietly. Amy was adjusting to being a mother of two, trying to find the balance between caring for her boys and holding on to her own health. At first, things looked fine on the outside. She smiled for the cameras, talked about the joys of motherhood, and tried to keep life as steady as possible. But behind closed doors, she was breaking down. The exhaustion of raising children, the pressure of being in the spotlight, and the weight of dealing with family drama all began to press down on her shoulders. The cracks started to show. Amy's close friends and even fans watching from afar could see that her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. Something was wrong. Then came the shocking truth that no one expected. Amy was hiding a painful secret. Her health had started to decline, and the doctors began warning her about the dangerous consequences if she didn't make drastic changes. But Amy wasn't just fighting her physical health, she was fighting emotionally, too. In her attempts to keep up with her children and shield them from the chaos, she neglected herself. Her body was screaming for rest, her mind was weighed down by worry, and her spirit felt trapped between duty and despair. The breaking point arrived when Amy collapsed in her home. It was a terrifying moment that left her children crying and her family in shock. Tammy, who had been fighting her own battles, rushed to the scene and couldn't believe what she saw. For years, people had focused on Tammy's struggles, Tammy's health and Tammy's hospitalizations, but now it was Amy, the sister many considered the strong one, who was in danger. Paramedics arrived, and the scene became chaotic. Amy was barely conscious, and the fear in her children's voices cut through the air like a knife. For the first time in a long while, the Slaton family realized that Amy's health was hanging by a thread, and if something wasn't done immediately, they could lose her at the hospital. Doctors wasted no time. They ran tests, hooked Amy to monitors, and tried to stabilize her. The truth came out in a flood of devastating words. Amy's body was under extreme stress. Her weight and lifestyle choices were worsening her condition, and the emotional strain she had been carrying was pushing her closer to a breaking point than anyone had realized. The doctors' faces were grim as they explained to the family that Amy's life was at risk if she didn't make changes. The family broke down in tears. Michael, Amy's ex, looked overwhelmed and defeated, unsure of what to do or say. Tammy, who had often been the focus of concern, sobbed as she realized her sister's pain had been hidden in plain sight. The roles had reversed in the most heartbreaking way possible, but Amy wasn't ready to give up. In one of her most emotional moments yet, she whispered that she couldn't leave her children behind. Her voice was weak, but her determination was clear. Those words ignited something in her family. They rallied around her, desperate to give her strength when she had none left to give herself. The doctors laid out a strict plan. Amy would have to commit to an entirely new lifestyle, a tougher regimen than she had ever followed before. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead would be filled with pain, sacrifice, and moments of doubt. But Amy's choice was simple: fight for her life, or risk leaving her children without a mother. What followed was one of the most emotional journeys Amy has ever faced. Every step, every doctor's appointment, every night spent crying in pain while trying not to wake her children became part of her battle. Her fans watched as Amy's vulnerability turned into strength. She admitted her fears openly, broke down in front of the cameras, and begged her supporters not to judge her. Instead, people poured out messages of love and encouragement, reminding Amy that she was not alone in this fight. Still, the drama didn't end there. Tammy, still recovering from her own health crisis, clashed with Amy in ways that tore at their bond. Tammy accused Amy of not taking her warnings seriously in the past, while Amy fired back that Tammy didn't understand what it meant to be a mother under constant pressure. Their fights got ugly, but underneath all the anger was fear of losing each other. Fear of losing the only constant they had in their lives. In their most heated moment, Tammy broke down and confessed she couldn't imagine life without Amy. For once, both sisters cried together, realizing their bond was deeper than their fights. The night Amy was rushed to the hospital became a turning point, not only in her own life but in the lives of everyone around her. The image of her lying on the stretcher, pale and fragile, haunted her family. The children cried for their mother, tugging at the sleeves of relatives who could only whisper reassurances they themselves didn't fully believe. The doctors had made it clear Amy couldn't keep living the way she was. And the family couldn't keep pretending she was fine. The truth had caught up with her, and now it was do or die. As Amy rested in the hospital bed, her thoughts wandered to her boys. She pictured their tiny faces, the way they giggled when she played with them, the way they called out Mama with so much love. The thought of not being there to watch them grow up crushed her. She whispered to herself that she couldn't fail them, not now, not ever. But as much as her heart ached to stay strong, her body felt weaker by the day. Machines beeped steadily at her bedside, reminding everyone that her life was hanging in the balance. Tammy sat by Amy's side that night, holding her sister's hand in silence. For once, there were no arguments, no harsh words, just two sisters bound by fear and love. Tammy's eyes brimmed with tears as she thought about how many times Amy had fought for her, stood by her, and never gave up on her even when Tammy had pushed everyone away. Now, Tammy was terrified that she might lose the one person who had never abandoned her. In a broken whisper, she told Amy that she wasn't allowed to give up, that her children needed her, and that Tammy herself couldn't face the world without her. The following days blurred together in a whirlwind of medical tests, stern warnings, and endless family meetings. Doctors painted a grim picture, explaining that Amy's weight, combined with extreme stress and lack of rest, had created a dangerous storm inside her body. If she didn't change now, she risked permanent damage or worse. The family tried to stay hopeful, but the heaviness in the room was impossible to ignore. Amy's mother, Darlene, broke down at one point, admitting she had feared something like this would happen for years. "I've already worried about Tammy every single day," she said through tears. "But I never thought I'd have to worry about losing Amy too." Michael, Amy's ex, struggled to process it all. Their relationship had been complicated, filled with tension and distance. But he couldn't hide the fact that he still cared about her. Seeing the mother of his children in such a fragile state forced him to confront feelings he had buried. He sat quietly in the corner of the hospital room, his head in his hands, listening to the doctor's warnings and wondering if he had failed her by not doing more when they were together. His silence spoke volumes, and the weight of guilt sat heavy on his shoulders. Despite the fear, Amy's determination grew stronger each day. When she was finally able to speak more, she made a promise not just to her children, but to herself. She promised that she would do whatever it took to fight, no matter how painful the road ahead might be. She said she couldn't bear the thought of her boys growing up without her, and that thought alone was enough to push her forward. Fans who had followed Amy's journey for years were stunned when the news broke. Social media filled with messages of support, prayers, and encouragement. People from around the world sent her love, reminding her that she wasn't alone in her battle. But the fight was far from easy. Once Amy left the hospital, she was thrust into a new kind of reality. Gone were the days of brushing off the doctor's advice or promising to change tomorrow. Tomorrow wasn't guaranteed anymore. Every single day became a test. She was given strict dietary plans, exercise schedules, and therapy sessions to help her cope with the emotional toll. The cameras captured some of these moments, but many happened off-screen, in the quiet corners of her home, where she struggled alone. One particularly raw moment came late at night when Amy broke down in her kitchen. She stared at the food in front of her, the cravings pulling her in one direction while the memory of her children's faces pulled her in another. She sank to the floor and cried, admitting to herself how hard this journey was going to be. But then, her baby's cry echoed from the other room, and that was enough. She wiped her tears, stood up, and whispered, "For them, always for them, always for them." Tammy, watching from the sidelines, became both Amy's harshest critic and biggest supporter. Their relationship swung like a pendulum, sometimes filled with explosive arguments, other times with quiet, heartfelt moments. Tammy would push Amy to stay on track, reminding her of the dangers, but Amy would push back, accusing Tammy of not understanding the unique struggles of being a mother. Their clashes often left both sisters in tears, but deep down, they knew they needed each other more than ever. The Slaton family dynamic shifted in ways no one expected. With Amy's health scare, the family realized they had to pull together. Even relatives who had drifted away in the past started showing up more, offering help with the children, dropping off healthy meals, and giving Amy the emotional support she so desperately needed. It was as if everyone understood that this wasn't just Amy's battle, it was theirs too. As the weeks passed, Amy's progress was slow but steady. She had good days, where she laughed with her kids and felt a spark of hope. And bad days, where the weight of it all crushed her spirit. But no matter how hard it got, she kept moving forward. Every pound lost, every healthier choice, every tear shed in private was a step closer to the life she wanted for her children. And though the road ahead stretched long and uncertain, Amy was no longer walking it alone. She had her family, her children, and the prayers of thousands standing behind her, pushing her forward when her own strength wasn't enough. Amy's recovery journey didn't happen in a straight line. While she had left the hospital with determination burning inside her, the reality of life outside those sterile walls hit her harder than she expected. At home, she no longer had doctors checking her vitals every hour, no beeping monitors to warn her of danger, no nurses rushing in when something felt wrong. Instead, she had crying babies, endless house chores, family drama, and cravings that screamed louder than ever before. The quiet moments, the ones no one else could see, became her greatest test. Late at night, when her children finally slept, Amy would sit on the edge of her bed, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. She'd touch her face, run her hands over the stretch marks on her arms, and whisper, "You're still here, you're still fighting." Some nights, those words felt powerful. Other nights, they felt like lies she was trying to force herself to believe. Tammy checked in on her constantly. Sometimes it came in the form of late-night phone calls, where Tammy's voice cracked as she begged her sister to stay strong. Other times, Tammy would show up unannounced, barging into Amy's house with her sharp tongue and blunt words. "You ain't got no choice, Amy. You either do this or you die, and I ain't ready to bury you." The words hurt, but Amy knew they came from a place of fear. Tammy had lost too many people already, friends, relatives, even her husband Caleb. The thought of losing her sister too was unbearable. The rest of the family rallied in their own ways. Amanda, the fiery and outspoken sister, became Amy's cheerleader, pushing her to stay on track and calling her out when she slipped. Their brother Chris, who had his own battles with weight loss, sat down with Amy more than once to remind her that progress, no matter how slow, still counted. One day at a time, he would say, "That's how we get through this." But while Amy had love and support surrounding her, she also had pressure. Being in the public eye made everything harder. Every time she posted a picture online, fans picked apart her appearance. Some left supportive messages, praising her for looking healthier. Others were cruel, making snide remarks about her weight, her choices, or her role as a mother. It was a cruel reminder that no matter how much progress she made, there would always be people waiting to tear her down. One particularly harsh night, Amy sat scrolling through comments after posting a photo with her kids. While hundreds of people had written "beautiful family" and "so proud of you," one comment cut deeper than the rest. "Those kids deserve a healthy mom, not someone who's one breath away from the hospital again." Amy dropped her phone and sobbed quietly into her hands. She knew she was trying, but in that moment, the weight of judgment felt crushing. Still, her children were her anchor. Every morning when they woke up and called for her, Amy found new strength. She would scoop them up in her arms, press her cheek to theirs, and remind herself why she was fighting. The fear of not seeing them grow up was enough to push her through the hardest days. She started small, longer walks, healthier meals, shorter naps, little victories that added up over time. Filming for 1000 Sisters captured pieces of this transformation, but much of what Amy endured stayed hidden from the cameras. The producers highlighted her breakthroughs, but the world didn't always see the sleepless nights, the private breakdowns, or the moments she wanted to give up. Yet those hidden battles were where Amy truly proved her strength. Tammy, too, was transforming alongside her. Having gone through her own near-death experiences, she found herself relating to Amy in new ways. Where their relationship once thrived on bickering and rivalry, it now shifted toward mutual understanding. One night, Tammy admitted something she had never said aloud before. "I used to think you were stronger than me, Amy. You held it together when I couldn't, but now I see, we're both strong in our own ways. We just show it different." For Amy, hearing those words from Tammy felt like a gift. It was rare for her sister to let her guard down, and it reminded Amy that she wasn't walking this path alone. Still, challenges kept coming. Recovery wasn't just about weight, it was about healing years of habits, traumas, and fears. There were setbacks, moments where Amy slipped into old patterns, where exhaustion or stress got the better of her. But each setback came with a lesson. She learned not to beat herself up over every mistake, but to keep moving forward. Progress, not perfection, became her mantra. As the months passed, Amy's resilience began to shine. Fans started noticing subtle changes. Her energy was different, her face brighter, her smile more genuine. She posted videos laughing with her kids, playing outside with them, and fans could see the spark returning. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was beginning to live again. And yet, the journey was far from over. The threat of another health scare always lingered, a shadow hanging over her every choice. But Amy refused to let fear control her. Instead, she clung to hope. She reminded herself daily that she had already survived what many thought she couldn't. She had faced death. And she had chosen life. That choice, repeated every single day, was what would carry her forward. By the time Amy looked back on those terrifying hospital nights, she no longer saw only fear. She saw a turning point, a moment that forced her to confront her reality and demand better for herself and her children. It wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of a new one, a story of resilience, of love, and of a mother's unshakable will to live for her kids.